All right. Happy Thursday, everyone. Looks like we have our first guest joining in. And I'm going to hand it over to Alan to kick off our formal introductions in just a minute here. But first of all, I wanted to say a few quick thank yous and shout outs to our guests here today. Alan, our first ever guest moderator. This is huge. We are so happy to have someone who has such a wealth of knowledge on this topic joining and leading the discussion here. So thank you again for being here. We have Charles, who is joining as the head of security at Delve, and also a former GRC leader at Netflix. We also have Chris, who is joining as the director of security at Ashley Furniture, and Keith, who will go into his very extensive breadth of experience and knowledge, but is now proudly our new CIO in residence at Dune Security. Now, today we're going into a topic that is very highly requested from our audience, which is focused on making cyber risk board ready. Very excited to dive into this. I think it's going to be really tangible, really valuable for everyone in attendance, and get into specifics about how you can actually translate lots of data, lots of very quantitative information into qualitative outcomes and results for GRC teams and CISOs. Now, for anyone who is joining us live, please feel free, drop your name, drop your LinkedIn, your location in the chat. We would love for everyone to be able to connect during this and after. And if you have any questions, feel free to also drop those in the chat. We will be able to include those as Q&A, which Alan will take a look at later in the session. All right, so looking forward to a great conversation. Based on this, I'm going to actually turn it over to Alan to give more formal introductions and then get the conversation started. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, everybody, I'm Alan Luk. I'm on the GRC team at Microsoft Azure. A little bit about my career. I have 20 plus years in the GRC. Started with PwC as an internal external auditor, then went to Microsoft for over a decade doing second line of defense and compliance teams. Then latest role was leading the GRC team over at Grammarly and reporting directly to CISO, and then coming back to Microsoft just a short while ago. I'm super excited to be able to play moderator for the session. 20 plus years in GRC. I have never personally been able to sit in on a boardroom meeting. I was never invited. So I'm super excited to be able to pick the brains, the three gentlemen with me on the panel, and ask my own questions, like I'm having dinner with these guys, in a closed room, and hopefully all of our viewers, will feel the same way and benefit, from the insights from you all. So I'll pass it over to Charles, for a quick intro.
Thanks, Alan. As mentioned, my name is Charles Nwatu, head of security at Delve. Before that, was building out GRC engineering at Netflix. I think for me, I did not come into the GRC space directly. I started as a incident responder detection engineering field, and over the years migrated into like enterprise security, cloud security, but was really interested in what GRC can provide as almost like a map to how things are going within your security organization, and being able to support some previous leaders as to how do we answer and address the questions that our board has. So really looking forward to the conversation today and what we can share broadly with folks.
Chris?
Hey everyone, Chris Glanden. I'm the Director of Security Architecture, Engineering, and Network Security at our Ashley Furniture Industry. So that's why my title is shortened on your screen. It's a very long title. I have about 25 years plus in the industry, including a lot of time as a strategic consultant. So not only my experience currently, but also past experience is helping organizations get in front of the board and communicate the message to the boardroom is something that I have a lot of experience in as well. So very privileged and honored to be sharing the platform with these gentlemen today, and looking forward to the conversation.
Go for it, Keith.
All right. Hi, everyone. Keith Schlosser here. I am the CIO in residence at Dune Security, and have been working with them for well over a year. Spent 36 years in insurance and financial services. Have spent a lot of time before boards at Fortune 500 and 1,000 companies. This is an important topic, and it's one that the first time you do it, it can be a bit overwhelming. The 10th time you do it, it can be a bit overwhelming. But hopefully we can demystify some of this for you folks and help you through it.
Awesome. Thanks for all the intros, gentlemen. Let's get right into it. I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. My style is to get into specifics, the actual get in the weeds a little bit instead of just kind of staying high level. I think our viewers will appreciate that too. So, be warned, right? I'm going to be hitting y'all hard. Just kidding. I won't. Okay, let's get into the first question. So, for many security and GRC leaders, right, such as myself, the boardroom is a very small circle, right, of people that are invited, to that. So it's kind of like a black box. For those that don't have this insight, can you describe what a typical board meeting looks like, right? Who's invited? What are each of their goals? What's a typical agenda? How much time is actually allocated to cyber risk, right? Because the cyber risk is a topic, today. Let's have Keith take a shot at the first response.
Sure. So, this has evolved over, I'm going to call it the last 5 years or so, maybe a little bit longer. But when I first started interacting with the board, the amount of time allocated was measured in under 5 minutes. And it was typically a canned report. Nobody asked any questions, and that was about it. Fast forward to today, and you're talking about, very significant amounts of time that the board spends on cybersecurity. They're more knowledgeable, obviously, than they were, some years ago. The people that go to these meetings are, I think it's important to understand that the board meeting is actually a series of meetings that's typically done over multiple days. You have your risk committee meeting. You have potentially an IT and cyber risk committee, that is involved. You have the general meeting that is involved. You have a kickoff meeting where you're involved. And so, in all the companies where I have been involved with the board, the cybersecurity function has been one of the departments that has reported to me. So oftentimes I'm in every meeting, and then the CISO joins me where appropriate. Each one of these committees or meetings has a different agenda. And I think you need to think through who's in the room, who the audience is, both your colleagues who might be hearing something for the first time and you don't want to surprise them. And then, of course, there's the board members. Board members have different agendas, and you doing your research and your homework on what is important to each board member is going to serve you well over time. So, there's a lot of meetings within the board meeting, and I think each one has a different agenda. The research that you do ahead of time is critically important to getting the outcome that you're after.
Awesome. I kind of had a feeling that, it's not just one board meeting. It's like, a series of meetings with different audiences and different agendas. So thanks for that. Charles, Chris, anything else to add for this first question?
I think Keith brought out something very important there. It's like the meetings that happen between the meetings and the amount of work that goes into understanding the audience and understanding like the perspectives that some of your board members actually sit on other boards, and like there's a style and the stylistic nature of what your board members will consume, and the narrative that goes into the development. Like there's like a story of orchestration that goes into this, and it's the process that alone, like it takes time. And I think Keith alluded to it earlier. It's the first time, whereas the 10th time or the 20th time, that process is the key in terms of like landing maybe your objective or theme and how you go about doing that. So I want to like emphasize that like the process behind the scenes is just as important as the meeting, the actual meeting itself.
Yes.
Okay. This next question is actually coming at you, Chris. So when cybersecurity is on the agenda and, one of these kind of multiple meetings that make up the board meeting, what are boards actually trying to understand or decide? Like what from your side of the organization, what are security leaders hoping to get out of these conversations? Is it asking for budget, asking for support? Is it alignment discussion, or is it just like informing, them of what the status is or the state of security is? Like what are trying to understand incentives here, like from the security side, approaching the board with something, presenting something, and the board on the flip side, what are you asking them to do?
Yeah, I mean, they're expecting value within maybe the 2 to 3 minutes that security is typically allotted, which is a challenge in itself. But I think generally, at a board level, they're expecting us as security leaders to have the metrics, but I don't think that they are really trying to understand or grasp security controls at a granular level. And I think that's a misconception often going in. They're trying to really understand the business impact and the business exposure. So when approaching a board meeting, I'll typically, you guys can hear me okay, right?
Yep.
Okay, I'm getting a little bit of feedback, sorry. So I think that, when you approach a board meeting, what they're trying to get out of it, or what they're trying to understand, is three things. Are we likely to be involved or impacted by a cyber related incident? The second is, what would it cost us if we were impacted or hit by a cyber incident? What would be the financial impact of that? And then, thirdly, I would say, are we investing in the tools and implementing the controls appropriately to address that risk? I'll give you a quick example. So, at a manufacturing company like ours, the conversation is going to be less about data theft or who the insider threat is, but it's more about downtime, right? If plants can't run, if manufacturing plants can't run, revenue for the business stops immediately. So that's just an example, but from my experience, that is really the crux of it and what the board really cares about.
Awesome. Let me dig into that a little bit. This is going to be later down on the question list, but since you're bringing up this example, like you said, you have like just a handful of minutes, right, to really just kind of say your pitch, say your thing, get some reactions, and then, have next action items. Like, how do you go about preparing, the presentation of that? Like, I'm sure you have all the metrics, all the detailed, numbers and analysis. Literally, how do you actually present that or share that, or basically cover all that in just a matter of minutes, to where you feel like they know, they have enough context, they have enough information, to kind of walk away with the right action item or the next, decision.
Well, hopefully, again, you know the audience, you know who you're speaking to. You try to not get too granular, and you keep sort of that 10,000 foot level mostly, right? I think that's more of around what you're getting at, is just trying to drill into, know what to cover, right? So when you're talking to boards, I think you're covering, you want to hit on trends, you want to hit on top risks. And by the way, board members love to read Forbes and Wall Street Journal. I've learned that over the years. So if you really want to hit and resonate with them quickly, do some recon on those websites, because that's what they're reading and that's what's on top of mind for them in terms of risks. But in terms of depth, I say we only go deep when there's a major decision or when there's money attached to it. Other than that, just go in with a tight scope of how you want to present what you're presenting at that point in time.
Could I add a couple of things to that? I think Chris is spot on. I will tell you from my perspective in answering that question, it starts with the annual plan that's agreed upon by the board, and the metrics and approach to updating them is established early on before the new year. And so a lot of times I'm preparing for a board meeting upwards of 2 months in advance. Like Chris, and I'm sure Charles, I'm also looking at the issues that are hitting the headlines, and I am preparing months in advance for when I get that board question. It could come in via email if it's a current event, or it could be something they've stored and they want to try and, stump the CIO or stump the CISO type question. So, the preparing is something for me personally that's always going on. Especially, I know I'm going to be in at least 4 events. In those 4 events, there's probably at least 3 additional meetings. So, you're looking at a significant number of meetings. The other thing that I would point out, and I'll just add on, the things that they want to go deep on are usually the things that are not tied to your metrics, because they've read those metrics ahead of time and they get them. And if they have a question, you're probably getting that question on a Saturday while they're reading the deck before the board meeting. What I think happens in the board meeting, or what I've seen happen in the board meeting, is really like questions around third-party risk, where they want to go deep on that. Trends was mentioned by Chris. Audit findings. A lot of times they don't wait for the audit meeting. They'll just hammer you in any meeting that you have with them on the audit findings, and everybody would be interested and involved. The last thing I'm going to say is that, and I know one of the other fellows will mention it, is that a lot of the conversation happens at the dinners and the coffee breaks. That's where you have to understand that that is a meeting. That is not a place to let your hair down if you have hair, unlike me, and just have any kind of conversation. You need to be prepared 24 hours a day while that board meeting is happening. So a couple of additional comments.
You don't mind if I jump into this one too, Alan, because you talked about being like the details and the specifics for what folks can walk away. I think something else, I think Chris and Keith touched on to this, like what are you trying to, what story or narrative are you starting to plant? And that goes, as Keith mentioned, like the dinners and everything else, like those are the formative times where you start planting the seed so that once you get to the meeting that the growth actually happens. And there's also a curious nature to some board members where they're like, they have heard something or read something within the Wall Street Journal, as you mentioned, Chris, and like, how does this affect us? Like, what are you all doing about that? Like, how do you reassure that we're okay? There's almost like a reassurance part of the narrative that goes into the development of your deck. And sometimes your deck can just get wiped out if something comes so hot that it doesn't even matter what's in the deck and the appendix, because the time is taken upon like, hey, I feel this right now. I want you to address it right now. Walk me through what we're doing. So I also want to be mindful, like sometimes you may come in with a set agenda, then that Mike Tyson saying you get hit, and then you just got to reorient yourself and then address the questions at hand.
Agreed.
Awesome. I got a off the strip question that just came to my mind. So I work in GRC. There's different audiences, right, that have different incentives, for understanding information about security posture, controls, compliance posture, all those things, right? We have different audiences if we're talking to like legal, external auditors, internal auditors, security leaders, right? CISOs. What category, does the board kind of fall into, right? Like, are you going to tell in these meetings, are you like 100% transparent? Like all the dirty laundry is like left on the table, and fair game to be talked about? Or is there some sort of level that you keep it at, similar to talking to like a legal, like, you're in a court of law, right? Just saying, answering what's asked of you and nothing more, type of thing.
Could I take a run at that from my perspective and then hand it off to anyone who's interested? So, one of the things that I'm sure the other fellows do as well is that you have a lot of meetings before the board meeting with the general counsel, who usually runs the meeting, with your CEO, with the chief operating officer, with the CFO, and so on. You need to make sure that they are totally on board with everything that is in your pack. And then usually, I was on executive committee at several organizations. Usually we'd have a read through of the board deck, which, by the way, can be 300-400 pages in length. So it's significant. Your job there is to get everybody on the same page so that when you go into the board meeting, to your point, Alan, you are talking about the things that are most relevant to the board. There was, I think you alluded to the level of transparency. For me personally, I'm never going to hide anything from anyone, whether it be the CFO, the CEO, or the board. But you don't want them getting involved in the operational metrics of your organization. You want them, you want to provide them with enough information so that they can do their job, which is oversight of the company and reducing risk and understanding risk and so on and so forth. That's their primary role. And I've seen situations where people, reporting to the board for the first time, almost are relinquishing their operational rights to the board. And if you do that, they will take it. And so you got to be super, super careful. It is something that is a learned behavior. You're going to make mistakes in the beginning. The best thing that you could possibly do from my perspective is get somebody on your team, in your company that's been there, done that, and ask them to mentor you through the first couple of meetings.
That's a great point. I would just say, sort of echo that and say, you don't want to hide information from the board, but you also have to be very careful with information disclosure. And I think we all know that term by now, but information disclosure, you go in with an agenda. You don't want to cast this wide net that's going to just spawn 100 more questions, right? So again, having that scope in mind, being able to go in and try to stay as close to that as possible. Yeah, but definitely don't withhold information. That's something that you don't want to do with the board. It's not a great idea.
Yeah, and I'll double down on Keith's comment about like getting a mentor, like someone who's done it once or twice or even 10 times, because there's like once again a building process that goes into this, and the narrative development, and to Chris's point, the disclosure. Like there's so many things that just can sometimes throw you for your loop. That yes, you make missteps, but it's all like a learning process about knowing the audience and who you're communicating to, what sort of drives them and motivates them, because the group itself has different incentives, and sometimes you just got to understand like who the incentive models you have to align with.
And one more thing, if I could, Charles, you made me think of it. My experience has been that they will ask you questions you do not know the answer to. You can count on it. And the answer should be, that's a question I don't know the answer to. I will get back to you before the end of this meeting with the answer. And, don't try and BS them, because it'll bite you. And then you lose credibility. It's hard to get it back. I'm sure you guys have had questions that you simply didn't know the answer to.
Awesome. Thanks all for entertaining that off the script question. Bringing it back on script now. Let's talk about quantitative versus qualitative. There's a lot of debates, right, in the GRC risk and compliance world about the need, for quantitative metrics in order for that to land well with non kind of technical folks, that are at the board level, and then other people are like, quantitative is black box in itself. There's more questions than answers. There's, you can challenge all these kind of models and the things that are spitting out the numbers. So what is your stance on it? How do you translate cyber and user-driven risk into business relevant terms that is more kind of digestible, by board members? When does quantitative data help? When does qualitative context matter more? How do you strike that right balance?
I'm interested in Chris's thoughts on this a little bit, but like the perspective that I've had in the past, and something that Chris brought up, like sort of jogged my memory, is like this idea of like controls, and then not getting too deep in the weeds, right? And so then how do you balance the understanding of like the quantitative element of maybe the risk portfolio management layer versus doubling down into, okay, we're going to go talk about the particular controls of stuff and the control effectiveness. I don't think that's my belief. I'm not sure that's the right ratio of depth with regards to breadth. I do think there's a concept to think about, how do we talk about risk management of impact and downtime, or I'll even frame it this way, like the impact of business objectives and reaching business outcomes with regards to security being a dollar value amount in that equation, because my belief is that it does exist within the business. The business understands its workflows in terms of how it generates revenue or its cost management capabilities. Why can't security talk in a similar language where it can at least demonstrate that value and impact to that workflow? So I'm intrigued. Like that's just my approach. It's something that I've been trying to figure out how to do in the board spaces, but also recognize that sometimes it's a different narrative that has not existed. So sometimes you're meeting inertia, and there's some battles where you're like, okay, is this the place or the time that I want to do that particular battle? And is this something where you go behind the scenes and you're doing your road show behind the scenes with members to sort of like, how do you get that one person that can be your champion and bring aboard? So to me, there's a lot of different avenues here about the qualitative and quantitative. My experience has been that qualitative is consumed. I'll use the like easier, but I'm not sure that provides the best insights into decision-making responsibilities? But would love to hear from you, Chris and Keith.
I actually don't know, but I'll get the answer and bring it back to you. I'm trying out Keith's response to the last question. No, in all seriousness, I mean, for me, in terms of the, I guess the translation, like I try not to present, and again, like you said, you kind of got to read the room and see who the champions are for what you're going for. But I try not to present security metrics. I try not to dwell on that too much. I try to highlight or more emphasize the business risk indicators. So like the dashboards and the metrics have their place. I'm just saying in the boardroom audience, in most situations that I've been involved with, security has, again, going back to that limited time that you may have with the board. So when you're looking at like patch rates or EDR agent stats or statistics, I'll dare to say that that's going to put the board to sleep most of the time. So you don't want to go too deep into the that part of the statistics and numbers, but more in terms of, this is the likelihood of production shutdown, or this is the risk of fraud that we're facing. And I think that the quantitative or the qualitative aspect is more of the terminology that I typically lean towards in speaking to the board.
So, obviously I agree with the guys, but I would add, some personal experience to it. And, the first thing is every year I would work with the board and the risk committee to come up with some sort of metrics that they can look at over time. And so when I provide them with their quarterly metrics, I'm also providing them with the previous 3 quarters of metrics as well, so that they can see trending over time. If there's a deviation, then I explain it, or I explain that we switched out a product or something like that, and it caused some temporary blip in the numbers. When I get into the meeting, I assume that they've read that. And I say that, I'll say, I assumed it's read. Do you have any questions? If not, let's talk about what this means to our business. And then we start into that conversation, which I think accomplishes both aspects of the question, both the qualitative and the quantitative. And that seems to work really, really well. And then it inevitably leads to some other question where we go a little deeper. I don't know if that's helpful for you folks, but it certainly was helpful for me as I was trying to navigate, some sort of standard pack of data that they could digest that would lead to conversation that I thought was important.
Yeah, real quick, I just want to jump in real quick, if you don't mind, and just like, I think you said something very important there is being able to sort of simplify the language, right, and sort of convert everything. For me, convert everything to impact.
Yeah.
Right? You're looking at number of vulnerabilities versus, okay, there are serious system flaws that could disrupt production or customer orders that are going to negatively impact revenue stream. I don't think you have to have the numbers in front to be able to get that message across. Or MFA, let's just say we're trying to roll out MFA. These are accounts that could, or situations that could produce level of fraud or lead to unapproved wire transfers or things like that. Something that provides that, I guess, business impact at the end of the day. But then have those numbers, have those metrics in your back pocket in case you need to dig into those more. But I think up front, and this is just me, it's more around staying more on the qualitative side of things.
A great example of that is with Dune. If you're migrating to Dune from some kind of legacy SAT tool where everybody was passing, and now you've implemented Dune and it's taken it to a new level, you're going to need to explain that. And to your point, what's the business impact? Well, the report right now makes it look like maybe we've gone the wrong direction, but the reality is the depth and breadth of the SAT platform and the training that we're doing is so much better, right? So that would be like, that's almost a perfect example of, Chris, what you're talking about.
Yep.
Awesome. Let me dig into that a little bit more, Chris. So, what is there a process or tools that you use to bridge the gap between like the technical security metrics and translating that into more like business relevant terms? Like, are you like some teams are going full blown like FAIR method, right, for quantitative risk, and like putting it in Monte Carlo kind of simulations to get some number. When what you're describing, could kind of fall in both categories, like qualitative or quantitative. Like the main thing is like don't show the metrics, but try to convey the business impact. So just want to dig into that a little bit. Like what translation process are you using to get from like just the raw metrics over into the business impact translation to the board?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I might have jumped ahead a little bit there, but again, it's going back to like try to translate terminology that we would use into the impact. So again, vulnerabilities may equal system flaws. Mean time to detect would be another example. So mean time to detect or respond would be more along the lines of how they would interpret that would be, how long are we going to be offline? How long are we going to be down? I think when you start putting this together and you're preparing for this talk, try to convert everything into dollars, downtime, or regulatory exposure. I think those are the three currencies that boards understand.
Awesome. Cool. Switching gears to another question. What do you see nowadays as being a hot topic agenda item related to cybersecurity or risk in board meetings? I can probably guess, what those are, but I want to hear from y'all. What are like a common recurring topic item, to be discussed at the board from a risk perspective or a cybersecurity perspective that you all are seeing today?
I would say one is data and AI, or the combination of those two. First, second, first. Doesn't matter. I think those two in particular in regards to like what is our position, what are we doing about it, how are we enabling the workforce? Like it's not just purely just security related. It's almost like a business foundational question. Like where are we and what are we doing with those two things? So those are some of the things that I've seen and heard with regards to like what's keeping board members up. Those particular items. Definitely would love to see what Chris and Keith think about that.
Chris?
Yeah, data and AI are probably the ones that come up the most. I think there's like a shift that I'm seeing from not only board members, but from across leadership as a whole. And it's more, instead of, what are we doing with AI? It's like, how are we protecting the organization from the AI tools that we're using? Because at this point, I think everyone is tapped into AI at some point. So expecting that question from the board in terms of AI is what are we doing to protect the data and protect the systems versus where are we using it? How can we use it? A lot of that's already been written into the roadmaps, and the implementations are starting to become more prevalent. So I think that's, in terms of the data and AI, I definitely think that's number one on the list, and that's what I'm hearing around it.
I'm going to throw out a few topics I think are somewhat related to what you guys said, but I have gotten a lot of questions up until I kind of retired on insider threat. And I think AI plays a big part in insider threat, DLP, and so on and so forth. So, insider threat to me is both intentional and unintentional, still insider threat nonetheless. Third-party risk is another one. A lot of questions around third-party risk, AI in general, and now an emerging trend that I'm starting to hear about from people that are on boards, and they're calling me and asking me about it, is quantum computer threat. And I don't know if everyone would be aware, but there are some regulations that are coming out in the next, let's call it 2 to 3 years, certainly in Europe, around quantum computing and its impact on cyber threat. So, those are, the board, somebody said it earlier, maybe it was Chris, they're reading, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, The Economist, and so on and so forth. They're reading those magazines and they're talking to each other. And so you need to be prepared for what is out there. So, one of the best pieces of advice I think I've heard so far on this call is start reading those magazines and newspapers.
Got it. All three of you, mentioned data and AI, and then Keith, you mentioned a couple others that are not surprising either. So the next question is, what is the expectation, right? What is the expectation? These are standing agenda items that keep coming up, that are concerns and risks. What is the expectation for you as a leader or your organization to be addressing them? Is it just like merely to have a plan? Is it just to continue to monitor, the risk level? Like, what is the expectation, other than just kind of being an agenda item, for discussion or recycle?
I'll start. Be a thought leader within your organization. I think, gone are the days where the CIO and the CISO are kept beneath the stairs somewhere in the dark, right? I think it's our opportunity to shine. I think it's our opportunity to lead the conversation. I think the board is expecting that. If you're sitting across from the board, their level of expectation from you and for you is very high. These are roles that are reporting into the C-suite or are part of the C-suite, so incredibly senior. So, for me, the expectation is, be knowledgeable, be a thought leader, don't be afraid to share your opinion. Don't surprise anyone either, right? At the same time, you don't want to be the one that drops a a ball of flaming turd in the middle of a boardroom meeting. You want to make sure that if you have an opinion that could be controversial or out of the mainstream, that you're sharing that with the appropriate people. But it's okay to be a thought leader. It's okay to share your opinion. That would be my answer.
And if you throw that grenade, make sure you know where the exit doors are.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to run quick.
Or no, there's a good package waiting for you.
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. And I hate to say this, and I've said it before, but a lot of it does, I think, depend on the context of the agenda. But generally, for me, the expectation and what I would be looking for is to translate the clarity of my message and alignment. I think budget is often part of it, but what I would really like to expect and what I would really like to see is alignment on priorities and understanding the risk acceptance that we as an organization will be taking. If the board says, we understand this and we're choosing not to fund it or not support it, to me, that's actually a win. Because it's a conscious decision made by the board versus the board unknowingly carrying risk forward.
Yeah, I think Chris brings up a great point there in terms of the clarity and how that clarity brings intentionality to the decision-making process. So to remove that ambiguity, just even if it's not to do something, is just as clear as a signal to do something. So I think that doubles down into something that Keith mentioned earlier about the last time we talked, where were we at? So once again, how do we trend that decision over time? And then you can revisit those decisions to provide even additional clarity or reconfirm clarity in terms of where we're positioning at. So once again, like the process that you go through these things, it's to Keith's point, like it could be a 2-month engagement just to get to this state. And so I think it's like people need to be mindful about like how much work you're going to be putting in to like build that narrative, partner with the folks, do the prep work, the pre-work, the dinner work. Like there's so many things that go into that 2 to 3 minute, maybe you get 5 minutes sometimes conversation.
Awesome. Valuable insights. Running out of time, almost the end of time. I'm going to take the Q&A to see if there's any questions here. I see one at least from Jeremy. So thanks for engaging here and asking the question. I'll read it out loud. We'll do that, answer that, and then we'll just finish it off with some final takeaways, from each of y'all, and then we'll be done. So Jeremy's question: I've certainly experienced a board member trying to get too deep in the weeds How do you counter those type of inquiries? Open for anybody.
Artfully.
You say, "Oh, look at the time." That's how you get past it.
I'll take a run at it. I mean, it happens all the time. And, the first thing I would say is that if your partners who are running the board meeting, meaning the general counsel or the CEO, are paying attention, they'll jump in. And they're part of their job is to protect you from having to answer those types of questions. Now, if that doesn't happen or they're not in the room, I would say, something along the lines of, it's a great question. I'm not prepared to answer that at this time, but if you'd like to set up time to go over that in more detail on a one-off basis, I would love to do it. And any other board member who wants to join, we can certainly make that happen. But I'd really like to prepare a fulsome answer for you and make sure I'm just not shooting from the hip. That's how I would probably handle it, something like that.
I would say the same thing, and try to redirect your answer back to the purpose that you're there for, which would be to identify the business risk and impact. Try not to go too far off topic. You can go deep down a rabbit hole in those conversations. So again, try to be direct and redirect your purpose, or redirect your answer to the purpose while you're there. That's what I would add to that.
Awesome. Two other questions came up, so I'm going to try to get through those. Next one's from Yusri. I think this one goes to you, Keith, because you brought up quantum computing. So the question is, what are some policies we should have in our organization about quantum computing?
So I wouldn't consider myself an expert right now on this, and I think it's a evolving issue. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm going out and looking at some of the emerging, regulatory language, and then using that to help inform the strategy. So I'm somewhat retired now, so I'm not sitting in front of the board, but the first thing I would do is get with your risk officer, if your company has one, and start talking about a strategy on how to start putting some guardrails in place. I would be reading as much as I can. I'd probably reach out to some quantum computing organizations and ask them that question, because they're certainly getting it. And then I would go deep on the regulatory aspects. One thing I would probably advise against, this could be controversial, don't go hire a consultant, because the consultant's sitting at the exact same spot everybody on this call is sitting at, but they're just going to charge you $400 or $500 an hour to make stuff up. So, I think it's where you can be a leader and do your own research. And at some point you might want to hire outside help or outside counsel, but I think there's a lot that you can do on your own.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll answer that real quickly and real briefly. I would just say there is something called quantum risk exposure. So one of the things I would direct someone to do would just be sort of inventory all of the controls and technology within your environment, VPNs, authentication mechanisms, and sort of get an idea of what that target footprint would be in your environment. But also, echo the fact of, there are experts in this field that concentrate on these things. But to get ahead of that, make sure it's within your environment systematically, that will help you at least address that when the time comes.
Awesome. One more question from the audience, and I'll throw this at you, Charles. So Paul is asking, how can having advanced threat and risk intelligence be used for board meeting conversations?
I also think this is particular to the industry and business line that you're in. In my experience, some of these conversations can go down the rabbit hole real quick if they're not really tangible to the business itself. I would say, depending on the business vertical that you're in, maybe more of appendix-based data, unless that you're mapping it back to things that can drive like operational outages or security-related outages that impact business ability to achieve its goals. So I've been wary of bringing in purely threat and risk, and I'm thinking, like, when you say advanced threat, to more be of the higher orders of adversaries into the conversation unless there's an explicitly linked concept for the board to be aware of, versus just bringing it in as like another metric or data point. I think that causes the rabbit hole conversation that might not be beneficial, but that's just been my experience.
Awesome. Well, we're just about time here. I want to finish it off with kind of like a rapid fire round robin. 1 or 2 key takeaways, right? Tips for somebody that may be preparing, for the first board meeting, or maybe got burned, the first couple times and want to know how to improve. You can draw from your, personal experiences, lessons learned, but just kind of, 1 or 2 tips that our viewers can kind of take away, that are going to stay with them after they leave. We'll go with Keith first.
Be confident you are the expert in the room when you're in front of the board. Understand that your answers matter. Do your homework ahead of time, and make sure that everyone on the leadership team understands what you're about to say, and make sure that you do all the prep work ahead of time so you don't have any missteps or flaming piles of stuff in the middle of the room that you got to deal with afterwards.
Awesome. Chris?
I'll give you 2 sound bites you can use. So the first one would be that boards don't want cybersecurity updates. They want confidence and reassurance that the business can keep operating. Bottom line for them. And then the second one would be, if a board member can't explain your slide or your message to another board member or another board executive in 30 seconds, then it's too technical.
I was going to say that. Avoid the technopuke, right? Because soon, board members, this is really important. Their board members, they've been very, very successful. They don't typically get into situations where they don't understand something. And if they don't understand it, you're going to get an aggressive board member, and it's not going to work out well for you. I'm right, Chris? I mean, you've been there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say, I think Chris and Keith just touched on it. I would say, like, words matter, clarity of communication matters, and understanding the means and modes of how you represent your information matters. The presentation of your slide deck matters. Like, the organization of your slide deck matters. There's even the visual nature of how you track and read the slide deck matters. So spending time actually with some UX designers on plotting information and the presentation of information, colors and schemes. I know it sounds crazy, but it does matter to how people see information, retain information, and also, more importantly, react to information.
Excellent point, Charles. That I'm surprised it ended up right at the end, but I'm glad it did. That is an excellent point.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much, for being on the panel. Y'all have a wealth of experience and insights that, I personally gained a lot from it. Hopefully our viewers feel the same. Just thank you again, for taking the time. And I think Kayla is going to come in and close us out.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Right on cue. Hey, thank you, everyone. I am not just saying this because I have you all in front of me right now, but this is really my favorite conversation that we've had on Dune's webinars previously. There was tons of really great questions, Alan. It was clear how much thought you put into how you actually put this together. Chris, Charles, and Keith, amazing points. Everything from actually knowing your audience and reading what they read and making sure that the narrative is very focused on actual business risk indicators versus a lot of technical information that people probably will either try to get too into the weeds with or just will go straight over their heads. I think that's really valuable. We're going to be sharing over some specific clips that we thought were particularly valuable with everyone here who joined, as well as anyone who signed up but couldn't make it. We're going to send over an overall recap as well. Please feel free to share this with anyone you think might find this valuable. And if anyone who's watching today is either interested in seeing other topics that you'd like us to speak about in future webinars, or if you'd even like to participate in one in the future, please feel free to reach out to our team. We're more than happy to speak with you about that. Thank you, everyone. I think we're going to wrap it up here, but of course, please feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.